Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our last webinar of our Increasing Inclusive Practices. Sorry, let me pause this. There we go. Welcome to our last webinar for our Increasing Inclusive Practices series that we have been bringing to you. I will go ahead and introduce myself. I am Veronica Mullen, TK-12 specialist. I'm here with our wonderful instructional group from the Division of Special Ed. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves and get us started with our Structuring the Inclusive Classroom webinar. Joanna, will you take it away?
Welcome everyone to the Structuring the Inclusive Classroom webinar training. In this webinar, we will be sharing information on how to support all students on the core curriculum. I am Joanna Perez, one of the support providers with the Division of Special Education Instructional Support Team. And during this webinar, my colleague Ana Luciani Cervantes and I will be your presenters.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm here too. Thank you, Joanna.
Awesome, thank you, Ana. So please note that in a few minutes, we're going to be sharing a lot of links and resources in the chat, and we're going to begin by dropping in the chat the link to a resource folder. Okay, thank you. Here are the webinar norms. It's important to establish some webinar norms so that we can achieve our goals for this training. We invite you to be present, be kind, and be flexible. We know there might be some hiccups along the way as we just witnessed, right? Especially with technology. But if this happens, just, be patient with us and let's all take a breather. It'll be okay. We also invite you to ask hard questions and to be considerate of others. Make sure those questions are pertinent to today's training. Also, keep an open mind. We all come from different experiences and will have different thoughts about the information presented. For some of you, this information may be familiar, and for some, this information is new. And let's remember that what we learn here leaves here. Let's go ahead and share the knowledge and all the information acquired today with all stakeholders at your school sites. These are the learning invitations for today. To gain an awareness of the strengths and challenges of students with disabilities. To look closer at evidence-based practices, or EBPs, to support student needs, to see examples of structured teaching, and at the end of the presentation, we want to provide you with additional resources. As we go through this webinar today, see how today's learning can benefit all of our students. Our first learning invitation is to develop an awareness of our students with disabilities, strengths, and challenges. We can actually compare how we see our students to an iceberg. When looking at an iceberg, we can only see what is visible above water. However, we know there is a lot more than what's in plain sight. We tend to see a lot of deficits and what our students with special needs can't do. But when we look under the surface, there are so many strengths and talents that they possess that we do not know about unless, of course, we take the time to look. Here are some of the strengths we see in our classroom with our students with disabilities. They are creative and they have dynamic reasoning, such as the ability to reason in novel situations. This is helpful for business or even the scientific field. Many of them have material or spatial reasoning. That heightened ability to solve problems with navigation or with the visualization of faces, scenes, and objects. This skill can be useful for designers, engineers, filmmakers like Steven Spielberg, or photographers like Ansel Adams. Our students can have strong working memory, visual thinking, and be good with conversations. Here are some of the challenges we see with our students with disabilities. They may have difficulty with planning, setting goals, and prioritizing. They can have challenges with organization. Students may also have difficulty with attention, like shifting, thinking flexibly, and working memory. Sometimes they exhibit challenges in emotional regulation and inhibition, which is the ability to focus, wait our turn, or pay attention to the correct thing. Classrooms have become increasingly diverse. Our classrooms may be composed by English language learners, students with disabilities, and students with differences in their perception and the way they process information. Some students learn best through listening, while others listen and learn best when presented with visual information. Our students are like the spectators in this slide. Not all spectators are able to enjoy the game. So what should be done? Should they all receive the same support to make it equal? In the first picture titled Equality, everyone is given the same supports. Now that clearly meets the needs of some, but not all. So how do we meet the needs of the rest? Well, what if we focus on equity? Does this meet the needs of all learners? Sure, but this might be a challenging task to make sure everyone gets what they need, right? However, is there a better way? What if we can plan our lessons with universal supports in mind, just like the chain link fence that we see on the far right? For all our students, universal supports can help reduce anxiety and remove achievement barriers. We need to go beyond equality and equity to make lessons accessible for all. Keep in mind that Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is the proactive design of curriculum and instruction to ensure that these are educationally accessible regardless of learning preference, physical or sensory abilities. Just as physical barriers exist in our physical environment, curricular barriers exist in our instructional environment. Keep this in mind as we progress through the remainder of today's learning, as UDL will set the stage for designing instructional practice that will help all our students be successful. Here is the Universal Design for Learning UDL framework. The UDL framework guides the design of instructional goals, assessments, methods, and materials that can be customized and adjusted to meet individual needs. The framework consists of 3 principles. Let's take a look at the 3 principles and why the use of UDL strategies are beneficial for our students. The 3 principles of UDL are based on different areas of the brain that we use for learning. The achievement networks of the brain are the why of learning, the engagement. This part of the brain needs to be stimulated with interest and motivation for learning. The use of engagement strategies will ensure that students are motivated and interested in learning. Now, as for the recognition network of the brain, these are the what of learning. the representation. This part of the brain helps students understand information and content by how it is presented in different ways. Presenting lessons in multiple ways like videos, worksheets, or group work will help students access the content using their learner profile. And finally, the third area, the strategic networks of the brain, are the how of learning, the action and the expression. This part of the brain helps students express what they know. By allowing our students to show us what they know in a variety of ways, they will feel successful and will want to continue to show us everything they know. Finally, it has been found that using UDL strategies can prevent some behavior challenges. The UDL framework supports inclusive education. And given the increased number of new language learners across the world, the UDL approach allows successful learning for all students. UDL provides guidance to educators, and this is especially valuable for the diversity of classrooms and the diversity in modalities of learning. This allows students to acquire information more effectively. UDL supports students with diverse needs, those who come from different educational backgrounds, those who have different attention spans and interests, students who have different language abilities, and students who have different cultural backgrounds. And with that, we are now ready for the second learning invitation with Ana.
Thank you, Joanna. Our second learning invitation is to learn more about evidence-based practices. We call them EBPs, and these support students' needs. Here you see a matrix of the 27 EBPs with their corresponding definitions. The EBP chart is structured in the following way. Across the top, we see the 12 domains, and under that, we see 3 age spans, 0 to 5-year-olds, 6 to 14-year-olds, and 15 to 22-year-olds. On the left side, going down, we see the 27 EBPs listed. The colors are simply intended to differentiate among the different age groups, so it helps your eye see each column. If we take a look at an EBP and go straight across, and we see the colors, that means that this particular EBP is effective within that age span. These evidence-based practices are supported by research. Outcomes for students with autism will be better achieved if all people know and implement evidence-based practices to teach our students to learn, practice, apply, and generalize. This evidence-based practices chart and information comes from the CAPTAIN organization, the California Autism Professional Training and Information Network. It's a wonderful resource. We will drop this link in the chat, and it will also be available to you in our resource folder. Here's an easier way to read the 27 EBPs. They're listed by name here, all 27. And if you would like to learn more about any one of these EBPs, please refer to the CAPTAIN website and also the Affirm website. We will be sharing the link to both the CAPTAIN and the Affirm websites with you later this afternoon. And the 2 EBPs that we're now going to cover and highlight are here highlighted by the orange boxes. We will focus today on visual support and reinforcement. So why use EBPs? EBPs are effective educational strategies supported by evidence and rigorous scientifically based research. They have a positive effect on student outcomes, and federal law requires that education professionals use evidence-based practices and programs. These practices can yield effective results when implemented with consistency and fidelity. Okay, as we mentioned, we're going to jump in now onto visual supports and reinforcement. Let's talk briefly about what visual supports are. They are concrete cues that are paired with or used in place of a verbal cue to provide a learner with information about a routine, activity, expectation, or skill demonstration. We use visual supports because they present information in a way that helps students focus on key elements across settings. Many students, particularly students with ASD, struggle solely with verbal instructions of what to do and or what to do next. Here is an example of a visual support based on the needs of the students. The example on the left is a good visual support that you can use in elementary classrooms. The example on the right is an example for a secondary setting. Notice the hand signal for pencil and for the emergency. Okay. Now we're going to watch this video that speaks more about visual supports.
We use visuals every day. Icons, traffic signs, calendars, clocks, maps, recipes, grocery lists, and more. For students, visuals provide a form of communication that lasts much longer than spoken language. Examples include visual schedules, time timers, scripted routines, checklists, and visual reminders. Visuals literally help your students see what you mean. For students who are visual thinkers, have language processing delays, are easily distracted, anxious, or English language learners, visuals provide comfort, predictability, and access to the same information as their peers. People often think it is helpful to repeat instructions and provide verbal prompts, but more words can simply mean more language to process. Imagine getting to a vending machine and the visuals have been removed. Don't worry, Vinny will tell you everything you need to know.
Nachos, chips, cookies, Smarties, M&Ms, coffee, crisp, Babe Ruth.
What if the visuals on your phone were removed and replaced with someone to remind you of everything verbally?
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, email, weather, calendar. Oh, you have one appointment today.
Suppose we removed all visuals from your recipe book. Fortunately, we have your mother-in-law on standby.
Put the ground beef, onion, and oil in a frying pan. Stir to break up the meat as it browns.
We all need visuals in our life. Using more visuals throughout the day will help all students. Visuals encourage independence and inclusion. They reduce anxiety and frustration. They support self-regulation and universal design for learning. Visuals, a simple, convenient alternative to repeating yourself all day. Visuals. I see what you mean.
NorthstarPaths.com.
I know I wouldn't want my mother next to me all day telling me what I need to do, right? So as a recap, we all use visual supports every day. They provide comfort, predictability, and access to information. It really makes us self-efficient. They also serve as a way to facilitate communication. When working with learners with ASD, visual supports are key. Visual supports can be used in a wide variety of settings and can be used to address an equally varied set of needs. For example, visual supports can be used to address curriculum, behavior, social skills, routines, and independence. They can also be individualized to meet the needs of each student and can increase independence and functional skills. Visual supports must be easily recognized, easily understood, universally understood. If we think of that red light, most likely there's a red light around the world, right? And we know what that means. And most importantly, they must be taught. Visual supports can be divided into three categories that you see here: visual boundaries, visual cues, and visual schedules. Some examples of visual supports include pictures, written words, objects within the environment that you can just hold up and show, right? The arrangement of the environment or having those visual boundaries as well. Having schedules, maps, labels, organization systems, timelines, and scripts. These are all examples of visual supports. And the purpose of these are to enhance our understanding, to capitalize on a person's ability to gain information from that sense of sight, and to provide a commonality in language. Visual supports can range from body movements to environmental cues. Okay, let's take a moment to reflect on the following question. Look at these examples of independent workstations. Is one station better than the other? When designing the room environment, especially independent workstations, it is important to consider students' needs. What might benefit one student might not necessarily work for another student. Student needs drive the design of our stations. All right, let's hand it back to Joanna.
Thank you, Anna. Now, here we see some things to consider when creating visual boundaries for your classroom. Let's think about the location, furniture arrangement, the use of color and materials, accessibility, safety, and transitions. Now let's take a look at some ways you can create visual boundaries. Visual boundaries can be clearly designated by using things such as coverings, furniture, tape on the floor, labeling, and/or color coding. While every classroom may look different, there are some commonalities expected of all classrooms. One commonality all classrooms should have is that it should be free of visual distractions. All of the visual distractions that are specifically unrelated to the tasks. Our students are easily distracted, so think about how can we help with that? What can we do to remove those distractions? Visual distractions can be minimized by using study quarrels, or limiting the amount of visual clutter, placing sheets or curtains to cover materials, or by using natural lighting and window coverings. As for auditory distractions, these can be minimized by using carpeting or headphones. Here are some examples of visual boundaries in the classrooms. Now we invite you to share in the chat your initial thoughts to the following questions. How are these classrooms structured? So please take a moment to look at the pictures, and in the chat, you can drop your answer to the question. How are these classrooms structured? Okay, Anna, would you like to share some of the responses?
There are no responses yet, but I'm assuming that participants are thinking about the tables, right? We see kidney tables, we see the carpet, we see that space in between, so there's accessibility. Oh, let me see the Q&A maybe. There we go. Thank you, everyone. They are structured by whole group versus small group. We see whole group, small group, and individual spaces as well. Thank you so much for sharing. Next question, Joanna, we have one more or two, right?
Two more. Let's also think about this following question. How are the boundaries set up?
How are the boundaries set up?
Okay, Anna, do we have any responses to share?
I know the chat is disabled, but go ahead and write in your answers on the Q&A. That's fine, I can read them from there. For example, if we look at the bottom square to the right, we see two students it seems like an independent station, right? You see that wall with like writing pieces, and then we see that they are surrounded by another table, and there seems to be, it's like a quiet area, you know, that where I'm sure expectations have been set and students know what to do in that area.
Well, thank you so much, Anna, for participating along with us.
I'm going to share some of the responses. They just came in, Joanna. If you give me a couple of seconds. Yeah, we see the bookshelves and charts. Boundaries are spaces between groups. Groups are seated separately. Small groups of students are faced away from peers to minimize distractions. Whole group facing the board. Yes, thank you everyone for sharing.
Thank you. Okay, we are now moving on to the next section. So now let's take a look at some visual boundaries outside of the classrooms. And right here, we're just going to pose the questions and just, we won't ask you to participate in the chat. We're just going to ask you to reflect on your own. So here are the following questions. How are these settings structured? How are the boundaries set up? And what makes this environment good for our students? Again, keep in mind all of those questions and really think about why are these examples good for our students?
If I may add, Joanna, I think it's also a matter of safety, right? We want to make sure that our students feel safe. They understand what to do in each setting, whether it's eating their lunch or playing with their peers. So I think safety is a big one here.
Yes, I totally agree, Anna. Safety is number one. And with that, we are moving on to our next slide. Our second EVP is reinforcement. This is the process of engaging and strengthening a pattern of desired behavior. Positive reinforcement is a good way to help students practice desired behavior, habits, and skills. We want the reinforcement to lead to the increased occurrence of the desired behavior in the future. So why use positive reinforcement? Positive behavior intervention supports, also known as PBIS, is a set of research-based strategies used to increase positive behavior and decrease problem behavior. Based on their research findings, positive reinforcement builds students' self-esteem and makes them feel good about themselves. It also motivates students to continue the positive behavior, and it also boosts character development. Studies show that with the appropriate reinforcers, such as praise and student choices, the rates of on-task behavior improve both at the individual and also at the classroom level. So how do we collect ideas for reinforcers? Well, the easiest and fastest way to do it is by taking a survey. Here are 2 examples of surveys that can be given to students, parents, guardians, and all stakeholders that can provide information about the students' interests. Surveys are a powerful tool because they provide valuable information that helps us determine the appropriate reinforcer. In getting to know our students, we may discover that they like action figures or that they have a favorite snack. We can then use that information and use those items as reinforcers. For example, a student that loves Star Wars, the same student might be working on asking for help. So when the student is successful in asking for help, he or she may be rewarded with a Star Wars sticker. So now, how do we know if the reinforcement is working? Well, we must continually reassess to make sure that we have the appropriate reinforcer in place. Something that is reinforcing now may change in a day, a month, or in a year. So that's important to know. We are now going to take a minute to look at and think about this behavior chart. We see this chart in a lot of classrooms. So as we examine this chart, let's think about what is the purpose of this chart? Why would this chart not be considered positive reinforcement? Let's think about that. Okay, so if you would now like to share your response to that question, why would this chart not be considered positive reinforcement? You can go ahead and do so, and then Anna will help share your responses.
Here's one. If the student automatically goes to yellow or red at the beginning of the day, then it will have a bad day for the rest of the day. Maybe that can trigger some unwanted behaviors, you know, and it feels like the day is over before it has even begun. So that's just one example.
Thank you, Anna. So then let's wonder, what can we use instead of this? So I'm going to leave you with that question. And we are going to move on to the next slide now. Instead, we can use alternative behavior systems. Let's look at the class chain example on the left. Each color represents a desired behavior. So every time a student meets a desired behavior, a new link is added to the chain. This is a visual representation of meeting classroom expectations, and It also serves as a form of celebration for the entire class. Now, in the middle, we see the student versus teacher game. This is a fun and very competitive way for students to meet classroom expectations. As we see here, students receive a point for meeting expectations. And when the students do not meet the classroom expectation, the teacher is the one that receives the point. And in our last example, our great behavior, that's the chart off to the right. As we see students in our classroom that are exemplifying rules or expectations, when we use this chart, we would give students a Post-it note. The student will then write their name on the Post-it and then put it on the grid. So once we see that our board is getting pretty full, what we would do is then we would take a pair of dice, we would roll the dice, and then we would use the numbers to then find out which student on the chart would be the winner for that roll. Okay, so this is a way to motivate students to want to continue demonstrating that all of those behaviors that we want them to demonstrate. Okay. And now with that, we are back with Anna. So we will enter our next learning invitation.
Thank you for that. Once we structure the classroom environment, let's now talk about structuring teaching. Okay, this cartoon shows us, sorry about that. Going ahead. This cartoon, so sorry, I don't know what's happening, but here we go. The three components of structuring teaching are physical organization, scheduling, and teaching methods. If you see the cartoon here, it quotes, clearing a path for people with special needs. That means that we are clearing the path for everyone. So the three components, physical organization, scheduling, and teaching methods. The key to effectively using each of these is by individualizing. A classroom that is physically well organized will not benefit students unless individual student strengths and needs are considered in the planning phase. To effectively teach students, a teacher must provide structure, setting up the classroom so that students understand where to be, what to do, and how to do it, all as independently as possible. Okay. The website Ditch That Textbook is a reference for this slide and has many interactive resources on station rotations that are great to investigate. And we will be dropping that link to Ditch That Textbook on the chat. Here is an example of a primary class station rotation. Stations provide time for practice, preview, review, collaboration, choice of work time, and small group or individual teacher time and attention. The number and types of stations might look different in every classroom, but the basic idea usually stays the same. Students are in small groups and rotate around from station to station to complete a series of tasks, while the teacher works with groups or individual students. Students build their independence and learn with small group instruction. Okay. Sometimes we think that secondary settings won't benefit from classroom station rotations, but they actually do. Middle schools and high schools can provide valuable opportunities to meet with small groups of students. Again, students can work on study habits and independent skills, be cognitively challenged, and also receive extra teacher support. Okay, we're gonna watch a video on station rotations. This video is called How and Why to Integrate Station Rotations from Blended Learning with Kathleen Tucker. In the video, she discusses reasons why stations are effective. She continues to talk about how stations create opportunities to personalize and differentiate instruction for varied skill levels, and how stations can create smaller learning communities within the larger class. Also pay close attention to the terms online and offline stations, as well as horizontal planning. Let's watch.
All right, you guys are already in the station rotation groups you're going to stay in today. So this will be station rotation 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of the rotations has... I think there's a lot of reasons why it's effective. I know for me, there's really clear reasons why I do it. You know, a lot of teachers are dealing with large class sizes, and it can be really challenging to personalize instruction, to differentiate instruction for really varied skill levels. So for me, it creates these smaller learning communities within the larger class and creates more opportunities for me to work with small groups of students. There can be multiple stations that don't require technology or have technology. They're completely offline stations, and that flexibility makes it really attractive for a lot of teachers, particularly those of us who don't have a ton of technology at our disposal. And so what I tell teachers when I'm training is go horizontal with your agenda, which means lots of teachers plan their lessons with a linear agenda. We're going to do this first, and then this, and then that. And they might have 3 or 4 tasks on the agenda for that day. And so my idea is if you kind of go horizontal and you just take each of those tasks and make it a station, it's an easier way to kind of go from a traditional lesson plan to a blended lesson plan. So if we're going to read an article, if we're going to have a discussion, if we're going to go over grammar, why not have a small student-led discussion group, a small group reading and doing annotating, and then one group over here doing the online grammar piece. So we're still getting through everything that would be in a traditional agenda, but it's happening in stations as opposed to us walking through it kind of lockstep as a class. And when you move through a lesson lockstep as a class, there are fewer opportunities for kids to get support, ask questions, and so stations just create that kind of natural environment where kids can collaborate, they can problem solve together and ask each other questions. So for Station 1, they were doing a blast on audience, purpose, and style, and they are working on an argumentative piece for me about a topic of their choice, some debatable issue, and so they had a better understanding of different styles and different purposes. And then after that, I had them thinking about, after they blasted out their response to the question, I had them thinking about the argumentative piece they're writing for me and start thinking, who's your audience? What style is appropriate for this audience? They're going to be writing a vignette because they're reading House on Mango Street. It's just a series of vignettes, and that's been really challenging for them because it's an unconventional structure or style of writing. And so I wanted them to know what a vignette was, and I was checking out the blasts at Support Writing, and I thought, okay, if they're going to do anything well, I want them to do the description, the sensory-rich details and stuff in their vignettes, so that's why I chose that one. The blasts are just really nice, fun, kind of bite-sized pieces of information. And so when we're tackling specific pieces of writing, if there's a blast on it where I can just kind of expose them to some quick information, get them thinking about it, it's an ideal way to introduce a topic before I'm actually asking them to write to a specific audience or for a specific purpose or using a particular style.
I like that it is more interactive. You get to see what your peers put in as well, and then you get to review it and have other people review your work as well. And that you're using technology and it is not using paper and writing. It's actually having a screen in front of you, which is kind of like a safe haven for us sometimes.
Great video. Before jumping into your stations, let's make sure to have an organized visual support that communicates how small group rotation stations will be executed. Station rotation visuals can be presented in a variety of ways. Here are some examples of how to present visual schedules to groups. To group your students during academic centers, and visuals can represent the activity at each center. The numbers and the colors can indicate which group students will be in, as well as the activity or task that the students will be working on at each station. Structured teaching makes learning situations more predictable, and therefore it becomes easier for the students. It helps to overcome distractibility, resistance to change, and even addresses lack of motivation. Let's look at this short scenario. As the teacher and student finish an activity and its subsequent reinforcer, the teacher shows the student an item from the next activity. The student either moves to the appropriate area, taking the item with him, or he uses the item as an example to get other materials needed and brings them to his work table. As we see in this scenario, the student is successful. This is the use of a tangible prompt that helps the students progress to the next task or station. This scenario shows an organized classroom and systematic instruction and how they work together. Ultimately, it increased student independence, it reduced the time in between transitions, so it saved us some time, and increased the teachable time in the classroom. Being organized and systematic are key to implementing a structured teaching method. When giving directions, be sure expectations and consequences are clear and organized for the student. The use of prompts, physical, visual, gestural prompts, all should be clear and consistent. Being consistent with individualized reinforcers, which we talked about earlier. Many students tend to be motivated by their preferred activity, that reinforcer. All students should receive praise and social reinforcers, even when receiving a more tangible reinforcer. So we don't just give them the tangible item, but we explain to them why they're receiving it, right? We tell them why. The type and frequency of reinforcement for individual students should be planned prior to activities. Make sure that reinforcing consequences immediately follow the behavior or skill being learned so that the relationship between the two is clear, the tangible item and the behavior or skill that is being demonstrated by the student. Always reassess the effectiveness of the reinforcer and any changes in the student's interests, the likes, their dislikes, what are they motivated by? In addition, setting up a student's work from left to right gives him or her an organized and systematic base for completing tasks more independently, without as many verbal teacher directions. Providing only the materials a student will need for specific tasks will be less confusing to him or her. Placing the materials in the setting where they will be used can also help a student follow directions and complete the tasks more successfully. Written instructions with samples or pictures of the finished product will help students know what needs to be done. Pictures and written instructions, similar to a recipe, can be used to help students complete sequential tasks in the right order, what comes first, what follows, and last. And finally, as good educators, reflect on our routines, right? And remember to set aside time to model strategies. For example, using role play can be a fun activity and can help students understand. Let's look back together. Throughout our learning today, we have been invited to notice the beauty in our teaching world. Remember that iceberg at the beginning of our presentation? Well, today we hope you realize the power of diving beneath the surface to that part of the iceberg that wasn't readily seen to discover all the creativity and strengths our students possess. Today, we have been able to see how the UDL principles can help us engage, challenge, and motivate all of our learners. We looked at the EVPs, visual supports and reinforcements that can support our students' needs. And we looked at structured teaching, the physical organization, scheduling, and teaching methods. And finally, by beginning our journey, looking beneath the surface to engage, organize, and approach teaching with all the creativity we possess, friendly faces will always be there to greet us, just like this wonderful walrus. Okay, and we're gonna wrap it up here with Joanna.
Thank you, Anna. We are coming to the end of our webinar. So in the next few slides, as we promised, we are going to share some resources and references with you all. Some of the tools we have available within LAUSD to support your teaching and learning in the classroom are our Schoology resources. Here we have two. We have a course and a group in Schoology. We invite you all to join these and explore the many resources that are housed within each one of these. Okay, so I know they were going to drop the codes in the chat so that you have those available. Now, should you need more information on EVPs or autism, you can go to the Captain website, which is a multi-agency that works in collaboration with other agencies to support individuals with special needs. So we would invite you to, again, continue your learning by exploring the resources that Captain has to offer. They have so many resources such as fact sheets, they have PowerPoints. It's just a plethora of different resources that they offer. Other great resources of information on EVPs and also autism are Affirm or AIM, as these two provide, again, fact sheets, and then they also have training modules in which you can go through at again, you know, at your own pace and again, continue your learning. We also wanted to provide you with a link to the Florida Center for Reading Research. Within this site, you may find resources geared for pre-kindergarten through 5th grade, including lesson plans you can use for centers and small group stations. Finally, the last resource we want to share is the Positive Behavior Intervention Supports, or PBIS. This is designed to help guide users through the PBIS implementation process, starting with behavior identification and offering suggestions for interventions, as well as data collection tools. And with that, we have come to the end of our webinar. Thank you so much for sharing space and knowledge with us today. It is because of educators like you all who are willing to continue their learning and implement best practices that our students succeed. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you found and heard something valuable that you can take back to your classrooms, and we're here for any support. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.